Lucas Bennett had built his entire life around one principle: control everything, trust no one. So when he handed his car keys to a complete stranger in a crowded airport, a worn-down young woman he'd never seen before, he knew he'd just made either the biggest mistake of his life or discovered something he'd been missing all along. 6 hours later, staring at his phone with no word, no car, and no explanation, Lucas realized the second option was looking increasingly unlikely. But what happened next would shatter everything he thought he knew about risk, trust, and the walls he'd spent years building around himself. Before we dive in, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. The traffic wasn't moving. Lucas Bennett sat in the back of the town car, watching the minutes tick past on his phone with the kind of focused intensity most people reserved for watching their children take first steps or their stocks crash. 11:47 a.m. The meeting in Chicago started at 3 p.m., which meant he needed to be through security by 1:15 at the absolute latest. The drive from downtown to O'Hare usually took 40 minutes. They'd left with an hour and 10 minutes of buffer. That buffer was evaporating. "Can you take the shoulder?" Lucas asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharper. The driver, a middle-aged man named Carl, who'd been driving Lucas for 3 years, glanced in the rearview mirror. "It's illegal, Mr. Bennett. So is being late to a $20 million negotiation. With all due respect, sir, it's also impossible." "Look." Lucas looked. 3 lanes of completely stationary traffic stretched ahead like a parking lot. In the distance, red and blue lights strobed against the gray March sky. The shoulder was packed with people who'd had the same idea, all of them now just as stuck as everyone else. Lucas's jaw tightened. He pulled up the flight information. 1:35 p.m. departure. He refreshed his email. Nothing had changed in the last 4 minutes. The Meridian group was expecting him at 3 o'clock. Sharp. They were the kind of people who noticed when you showed up at 3:02. Lucas had built Bennett Logistics on the foundation of precision, of being early, being prepared, being the person who never gave anyone a reason to doubt. Being late wasn't in his vocabulary. "How long have we been stopped?" he asked. 12 minutes. Lucas did the math. It wasn't good. He opened his contacts, found his assistant Monica's number, and called. She picked up on the first ring. "I was just about to call you. Are you stuck in that accident on the Kennedy? You know about it? It's all over the news. 18-wheeler jackknifed. They're saying it could be hours before they clear it." Lucas closed his eyes. Hours. "Get me on the next available flight. I don't care what airline, first class, business, economy, whatever's leaving soonest." "Already looking. There's a United flight at 3:45, but it connects through Denver and doesn't land until almost 8. That's useless. What else? American at 6:20 direct?" Lucas felt something twist in his chest. The meeting was at 3. There was no way to make that work. 5 years of relationship building with Meridian, 6 months of negotiations, and it was all going to fall apart because of a truck driver who probably fell asleep at the wheel. "What about private?" he asked. "Let me check." The sound of rapid typing. "Signature Flight Support has availability, but the earliest I can get you wheels up is 4 p.m. Cost is, I don't care what it costs. 11,000. Lucas didn't hesitate. "Book it." "Done. I'll send you the details." Lucas, Monica's voice softened slightly. She was the only person in his life who occasionally used his first name. "They'll understand. It's a highway accident. It's not your fault." But that was the thing about Lucas Bennett's life. Fault didn't matter. Results did. And right now he was about to produce the worst result possible: absence. He hung up and stared out the window. They still hadn't moved. A woman in the car next to them was crying, her hands gripping the steering wheel. A man 2 cars up was shouting into his phone. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone's carefully constructed plans were collapsing. Lucas hated this feeling, this powerlessness, this sense that the universe didn't care about calendars or commitments, or the fact that some things mattered more than random chance. "Mr. Bennett," Carl said quietly, "I'm sorry. Not your fault." But Lucas could hear it in his own voice. The blame was there anyway, diffused and irrational, settling over everything like smoke. His phone buzzed. Monica, with the private flight details. Lucas scanned them mechanically. 4 p.m. departure from a separate terminal. He'd need to be there by 3:30 to handle the paperwork, which meant he checked the time again. 11:53 a.m. He had 4 hours to get somewhere 15 miles away. Carl, I'm getting out. Sir? I'm getting out. I'll take the L from the next stop. Mr. Bennett, we're on the highway. We're not on the highway. We're in a parking lot. Lucas was already gathering his bag, his laptop case. I'll walk to the nearest exit and figure it out from there. That's got to be at least 2 miles in March. Lucas looked at him. Carl knew better than to argue further. I'll make sure the car gets back safe, Carl said. Lucas nodded and stepped out into the cold. Psst. The walk took 40 minutes. By the time Lucas reached the Cumberland station, his dress shoes had raised blisters on both heels, and his wool coat felt like it weighed 40 pounds. But he'd made it. The blue line would take him straight to O'Hare. He checked his phone on the platform. 12:41 p.m. Still doable. Barely. The train arrived 6 minutes later, packed with the usual mix of airport travelers and shift workers. Lucas wedged himself into a corner near the door and tried not to think about the fact that he was sharing breathing space with approximately 60 strangers. He'd taken the L maybe 3 times in the past decade. There was a reason he paid for car service. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard Meridian himself. Looking forward to this afternoon. Big things ahead. Lucas stared at the message. Big things. $20 million in new contracts. Expansion into the Midwest distribution network. Everything Lucas had spent the past 2 years building toward. He typed back, "Slight delay on my end. Flight got complicated. We'll be there as soon as possible." The response came immediately. "No worries. We're flexible." Flexible. Lucas knew what that meant. It meant they were polite, professional, and already wondering if he was worth the hassle. In business, flexible was what people said right before they stopped being flexible at all. The train lurched forward. Lucas watched Chicago blur past the windows, gray buildings, gray sky, gray everything. March in the Midwest was nature's way of reminding you that winter didn't actually end when the calendar said it did. 40 minutes later, Lucas stepped onto the platform at O'Hare and immediately knew something was wrong. The terminal was chaos. Not the usual managed chaos of a busy airport, but something else. Something that felt like a barely controlled disaster. The security line snaked back past the ticket counters and out into the main hall. People were shouting. A child was screaming. The electronic departure board was a sea of red. Delayed, delayed, canceled. Lucas pulled out his phone and called Monica. "Please tell me you're seeing this," he said. "Seeing what?" "The airport just imploded." "What? Hold on." The sound of typing. "Oh no. Oh, Lucas. There's a system-wide ground stop. Technical issues with air traffic control. They're saying it could be..." "How long?" "Indefinite." The word hit him like cold water. Indefinite. Which meant his 4 p.m. private flight was meaningless. Which meant there was no way to get to Chicago in time. Which meant the meeting was dead. Lucas stood in the middle of the terminal and felt something crack inside his chest. Not dramatically. Not some cinematic breakdown. Just a quiet fracture. The sound of 5 years of work evaporating because the universe had decided that today, nothing was going to work. He found a seat near gate B7 and sat down. Around him, hundreds of people were having similar realizations. A man in a business suit was screaming at a gate agent. A family with 3 small children looked like they were one meltdown away from complete collapse. An elderly couple sat holding hands, staring at nothing. Lucas pulled out his laptop and opened his email. He typed a message to Richard Meridian. "Richard, I'm stuck in Chicago due to the air traffic situation. No flights going anywhere until this resolves. I know we had plans for this afternoon, and I can't apologize enough for the disruption. I'm hoping we can reschedule for later this week. The work we've done together is too important to let this get derailed." He read it over 3 times, hating every word, and hit send. The response came 20 minutes later. Lucas. "Understand completely. Unfortunately, we've got another group presenting on Friday, and we need to make a decision by end of week. Timing's just not working out. Let's reconnect in a few months and see where we both are. Best, Richard." Lucas read it twice. Then he closed his laptop. That was it. $20 million, gone. 2 years of work, meaningless. all because of traffic and bad luck and technical failures that he had absolutely no control over. He sat there for a long time, not really thinking about anything, just existing in the strange, hollow space that disappointment creates. That's when he noticed her. She was sitting 3 seats down, on the other side of a trash can. Young, maybe mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans that had seen better days, a jacket that looked too thin for March, and canvas shoes with holes near the toes. A small backpack sat at her feet. But it wasn't her clothes that caught Lucas's attention. It was the way she was sitting, perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring at the departure board with an expression that Lucas couldn't quite read. Not angry, not frustrated, just watching, like she was waiting for something she knew wasn't going to come. Lucas wasn't sure why he kept looking. Maybe because she was the only person in the entire terminal who didn't seem to be falling apart. Maybe because there was something about her stillness that felt like its own kind of answer to the chaos around them. She turned her head suddenly and caught him staring. Lucas looked away, feeling oddly embarrassed. He wasn't the kind of man who stared at strangers. He pulled out his phone and pretended to read emails he'd already read. Rough day? Lucas looked up. She was watching him now, her expression neutral but not unfriendly. You could say that, Lucas said. Where were you trying to get to? Chicago. Meeting? You? Nowhere specific. She said it with a small, strange smile. Just somewhere that isn't here. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. The woman went back to staring at the departure board. A long minute passed. Then Lucas heard himself say, Do you need help? She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something shift in her expression. Not gratitude, something more complicated. What kind of help? Lucas pulled out his wallet. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but the instinct was there. The same instinct that made him overtip servers and donate to charities and generally try to solve problems with money because money was something he understood. I don't know, whatever would make this easier. The woman studied him for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, Can I borrow your car? Lucas blinked. What? Your car. Can I borrow it? I don't have a car here. Yes, you do. You came in a town car. I saw you get dropped off. Lucas stared at her. How long had she been watching him? That's not my car. That's a service. You have a personal car, though, at home. Yes, but can I borrow it? The question was so absurd that Lucas almost laughed. You want to borrow my car? Yes. From someone you've never met? Yes. To go somewhere you won't tell me. The woman's expression didn't change. I'll bring it back. Lucas felt something surreal settle over the conversation. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the residual shock of losing the deal. Maybe it was the fact that this entire day had already stopped making sense hours ago. But he heard himself say, Why? Because I need to get somewhere, and I don't have a way to get there. And you look like someone who might say yes. I look like someone who might hand over their car to a complete stranger. You look like someone who's already lost something today, she said. So maybe you're feeling reckless. She wasn't wrong. Lucas should have said no, should have stood up, walked away, found another gate to sit at. Instead, he said, Where do you need to go? Iowa. Small town, about 4 hours from here. And you need my car to get there. I'll bring it back tomorrow, I promise. Lucas looked at her, really looked. She didn't look dangerous, she looked tired, worn down, like someone who'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and was finally reaching the end of their strength. Why not rent a car? Lucas asked. Something flickered across her face. I can't. Why not? Because I can't. There was a weight to those words that made Lucas stop pushing. He thought about the fact that she'd been sitting here, alone, watching the departure board like it might offer answers it clearly couldn't give. He thought about her shoes with holes in them, and her too thin jacket, and the careful way she'd phrased everything. He thought about the fact that his entire life was built on careful decisions and risk mitigation, and never, ever trusting people he didn't know. And then he thought about the fact that all of that careful planning had gotten him exactly nowhere today. If I say yes, Lucas said slowly, how do I know you'll actually bring it back? The woman met his eyes. You don't. It was the honesty that did it. Not a promise or a plea or an attempt to convince him, just the truth. He didn't know. He couldn't know. This was a decision that required something Lucas hadn't used in years. Faith. Lucas pulled out his phone and called his building's valet service. This is Lucas Bennett in 4207. I need my car brought up from the garage. No, I'm not there right now. I'm sending someone to pick it up. Yes, I'm sure. Her name is... He looked at the woman. What's your name? Emma. Emma, Lucas repeated into the phone. She'll have ID. Let her take the Audi. Yes, I'm serious. Thank you. He hung up and pulled a business card from his wallet. On the back, he wrote his home address and the valet desk number. He handed it to Emma. Black Audi A6, parking spot 47. They'll have it ready in about 30 minutes. Emma took the card, staring at it like it might disappear. You're actually doing this? Apparently. Why? It was a fair question. Lucas didn't have a good answer. Because you asked, and because nothing about today makes sense anyway. Emma stood up, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. She looked at him for a long moment, and Lucas saw something in her expression that he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe. Or surprise. Or something deeper that didn't have an easy word. Thank you, she said quietly. Bring it back in one piece. I will. She turned to leave, then stopped. Your name. I should know your name. Lucas. Lucas. She tested it out, like she was making sure it was real. I'll remember that. And then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of stranded travelers, leaving Lucas sitting alone with the slow creeping realization of what he'd just done. He'd handed his car, his $50,000 car, to a complete stranger, based on nothing but a feeling. Lucas pulled out his phone and stared at it, half expecting to see a news alert about a stolen Audi. But there was nothing, just emails he didn't want to read and messages he didn't want to answer. What the hell had he just done? 2 hours later, the ground stop still hadn't lifted. Lucas had moved to a different gate, then back to B7, then to a restaurant where he bought a $15 sandwich he didn't eat. His phone sat on the table in front of him, silent. Monica had called twice. He'd let both calls go to voicemail. He didn't want to explain what had happened with Meridian. Didn't want to hear the careful sympathy in her voice or talk through contingency plans that wouldn't matter. He definitely didn't want to explain that he'd loaned his car to a stranger. Lucas checked his watch. 4:47 p.m. Emma would have picked up the car hours ago, would have driven out of the city by now, could be anywhere. He opened the tracking app on his phone, the one connected to the Audi's GPS system. He'd installed it 2 years ago after a valet had taken his car on a joyride. The dot on the screen showed his car heading west on I-80, just past the Iowa border. So she'd been telling the truth about Iowa, at least. Lucas watched the dot move for a while, feeling something strange and uncomfortable twist in his chest. Not quite regret, not quite anxiety. Something closer to vertigo, the sensation of free-falling without knowing where the bottom was. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Made it to Iowa. Car's fine. We'll return it tomorrow, like I said. Thank you again. Emma Lucas stared at the message. She'd actually texted him, had actually bothered to reassure him. Most people who stole cars didn't send progress updates. He typed back, drive safe. Immediately he felt ridiculous. Drive safe. Like they were friends. Like this was normal. But Emma responded, will do. Lucas set his phone down and rubbed his face. The airport was starting to empty out. The ground stop had been lifted 20 minutes ago, but most of the flights were still delayed. People were beginning to accept that they weren't going anywhere tonight. Lucas should have booked a hotel, should have called Monica back, should have done 100 productive things. Instead, he sat there and thought about a woman named Emma, driving his car toward a place he'd never been for reasons he didn't understand. And for the first time in years, Lucas Bennett had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. By 9 p.m., Lucas had given up on leaving the airport. He'd booked a room at the airport Hilton, checked in, and now sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like industrial cleaning solution, staring at his phone. The GPS dot hadn't moved in over an hour. Emma's car, his car, was parked somewhere in a town called Riverside, Iowa. Population 1,059, according to Google. Lucas searched for the town, found a handful of images. A main street that looked like it hadn't changed since 1960, a water tower, a couple of churches. Nothing that explained why Emma needed to go there. Nothing that explained why she couldn't have rented a car or taken a bus. His phone rang. Monica. Lucas answered. Hey. Hey, that's all I get. Lucas, what happened? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I'm fine, just stuck at O'Hare like everyone else. And the Meridian meeting? Dead. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm sorry. Not your fault. What are you going to do? Lucas looked at the GPS dot on his screen. I don't know yet. Do you need me to do anything? No, just hold down the fort tomorrow. I'll be back in the office by afternoon. Okay. Monica paused. Lucas, are you sure you're all right? You sound weird. Just tired. Okay, get some rest. Lucas hung up and set the phone on the nightstand. He should have been upset. Should have been strategizing his next move or figuring out how to salvage the Meridian situation. Instead, he kept thinking about the way Emma had looked at him in the airport, like she was testing whether he was the kind of person she thought he might be. He'd passed, apparently. Lucas's phone buzzed again. Another text from Emma. I know this is probably strange for you, trusting someone you don't know. I just wanted to say, it means more than you realize. You gave me a chance to fix something I thought was broken forever. I won't forget that. Lucas read the message 3 times. Then he typed, What did you need to fix? The response came quickly. Something I should have done a long time ago. Lucas waited for more, but nothing came. He set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in Iowa, a woman he'd met for 10 minutes was driving his car toward something important enough that she'd asked a stranger for help. And somehow, impossibly, Lucas had said yes. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't settle. He kept replaying the moment in the airport, the moment he'd made a decision that violated every principle he'd built his life on. And the strangest part was, he didn't regret it. Not yet, anyway. Morning came slowly. Lucas woke at 6:15 a.m. to pale gray light filtering through the hotel curtains. His first thought was the meeting. His second thought was the car. He grabbed his phone. The GPS showed the Audi still in Riverside. Hadn't moved since last night. Lucas sat up, feeling the now familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. What if Emma had abandoned it? What if she'd sold it? What if she'd... His phone buzzed. Emma. Heading back now, should be there around 11. Where should I bring the car? Lucas exhaled. She was coming back. He typed, O'Hare Terminal 5, International Departures. There's a cell phone lot. Got it. See you soon. Lucas got up and showered, moving through the motions automatically. He should have felt relieved. The car was coming back. The risk had paid off. Instead, he felt something else. A strange kind of anticipation, like he was waiting for an answer to a question he hadn't known he'd asked. By 10:30 a.m., Lucas was sitting in the cell phone lot at O'Hare, watching the entrance. He'd checked the GPS obsessively for the past hour, watching the blue dot creep closer along I-80. Now it was less than 5 miles away. At 10:58 a.m., his black Audi pulled into the lot. Lucas got out of the rental car he'd arranged that morning and walked over. Emma parked, turned off the engine, and stepped out. She looked exactly the same as yesterday. Same worn jeans, same thin jacket, same tired eyes. But something about her had changed. She stood differently. Lighter, maybe? Right on time, Lucas said. Emma handed him the keys. Told you I'd bring it back. Lucas took them, feeling the weight of the metal in his palm. The car looked fine. No scratches, no dents. The tank was full. Did you have any trouble? No, your car handles really well. It's German. They build them properly. Emma smiled slightly. It was the first real smile Lucas had seen from her. Thank you, Lucas, for trusting me. You drove 8 hours round trip. I should be thanking you for not proving me completely insane. You're not insane. Debatable. They stood there for a moment, and Lucas realized he didn't want her to leave yet. There were questions he wanted to ask, needed to ask, but he didn't know how. Emma seemed to sense it. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I left you something, in the car, on the passenger seat. Lucas glanced through the window. There was an envelope sitting there. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Emma adjusted her backpack. I should go. I have a bus to catch. Where are you headed? Forward, Emma said simply. Then, before Lucas could respond, she added, That thing you did yesterday, handing me your keys? That was the first time in 3 years someone took a chance on me without asking questions, without needing proof I was worth it. You have no idea what that gave back to me. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. What did you need to do in Iowa? Emma's expression softened. I needed to see my daughter. I lost custody 2 years ago, made some bad choices. Her foster family lives in Riverside. Yesterday was her 6th birthday, and they let me visit for a few hours. First time I've seen her in 8 months. Her voice cracked slightly. I couldn't afford a rental, couldn't get approved for one anyway, but I couldn't miss her birthday. So I took a chance on a stranger in an airport. Lucas couldn't speak. Your car got me there, Emma continued. Got me back. Let me be her mom for an afternoon. That's everything. She took a step back, and Lucas saw tears in her eyes that she was fighting to keep from falling. I'm getting clean, she said. For real this time. Got a job lined up. Got a place to stay. I'm doing everything they asked. And maybe if I keep doing it, I get her back someday. She wiped her eyes quickly. Sorry, you don't need to hear all this. No, Lucas said quietly. I do. Emma looked at him, and in that moment, Lucas saw something he recognized. The weight of trying to fix something broken. The hope that maybe this time it would work. The fear that it wouldn't be enough. Good luck, Lucas said, with everything. You too. And then she was gone, walking away across the parking lot toward the terminal, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Lucas stood there for a long time after she disappeared, feeling something enormous and unnamed settling into his chest. Then he got into his car, sat in the driver's seat, and picked up the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on lined paper torn from a spiral notebook. Lucas, I don't know if you'll ever understand what yesterday meant. You saw someone who looked like a mess and a risk and probably a mistake, but you said yes anyway. You trusted me with something valuable without needing promises or collateral or proof. You just believed me. That kind of faith is rare. I've spent the last 2 years being told I'm not trustworthy, not reliable, not worth the risk. And I believed it. Until a stranger in an airport proved all of them wrong. I got to see my daughter yesterday. I got to hold her and tell her I love her and that I'm fighting to come back to her. I wouldn't have had that without you. I know this probably sounds dramatic, but you gave me more than a car. You gave me a reason to believe I'm still worth trusting, that I can still be the person I need to be. So thank you for taking a chance on someone who desperately needed one. Emma Lucas read the note twice. Then he folded it carefully and set it on the passenger seat. He sat there in the cell phone lot, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, and felt something crack open inside him, something that had been locked and sealed for longer than he could remember. He'd spent years building a life around control and certainty, around never taking risks he couldn't calculate, around trusting no one he couldn't vet. And yesterday, in a moment of exhaustion and frustration and maybe desperation, he'd thrown all of that away for a stranger with worn-out shoes and honest eyes. The car was back. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged, but something had changed. Lucas pulled out his phone and looked at the message thread with Richard Meridian. The deal was dead. 2 years of work, gone. It should have devastated him. Instead, he felt something else, something quieter, something that felt almost like relief. He started the car and drove out of the lot, heading back toward the city, Emma's note resting on the seat beside him. For the first time in years, Lucas Bennett had no idea what came next. But somehow, that felt exactly right. The drive back into the city felt different. Lucas couldn't explain it exactly. The roads were the same, the skyline unchanged. The mid-morning traffic as dense and irritating as ever. But something had shifted in the way he saw it all. Or maybe something had shifted in him. Emma's note sat in the center console. Lucas kept glancing at it at red lights, like he needed to confirm it was real. The words played on repeat in his head. You gave me more than a car. You gave me a reason to believe I'm still worth trusting. Lucas had never thought of trust as something you could give. Trust was earned, calculated, verified through data and track records and references. You didn't just hand it to someone because they asked. That was how you got taken advantage of, how you lost things. Except he hadn't lost anything. Emma had brought the car back exactly as promised, had driven 8 hours round trip to see her daughter, then returned to give him back something he'd loaned on nothing but a feeling. The math didn't work. The logic was broken. And yet here he was, car intact, note in hand, feeling something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Lucas pulled into the underground garage of his building and parked in his assigned spot. He sat there for a moment with the engine off, staring at the concrete wall ahead. Then he grabbed the note, locked the car, and headed upstairs. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it 2 days ago. Immaculate, organized, sterile, everything in its place. The cleaning service had been through yesterday, which meant the already spotless surfaces were now even more spotless. The kitchen counters gleamed. The hardwood floors reflected the morning light coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lucas dropped his bag by the door and walked to the kitchen. He made coffee out of habit, not desire, and stood at the counter drinking it while looking out at the city below. 42 floors up, high enough that the people on the street were barely visible, high enough that you couldn't hear the noise or smell the exhaust or feel any of the mess and chaos that made up actual life. He'd bought this place 6 years ago, right after Bennett Logistics landed its first major contract. It had felt like a victory then, a symbol of everything he'd worked for. Now it just felt like a very expensive box. His phone buzzed. Monica. "You back?" she asked without preamble. "Just got in. How are you doing?" Lucas considered the question. How was he doing? He'd lost a $20 million deal. He'd handed his car to a stranger who could have disappeared forever. He'd spent a night in an airport hotel staring at the ceiling and questioning every decision he'd made in the past decade. "I'm fine," he said. "You're a terrible liar." "Then why do you ask?" Monica sighed. "Look, I know Meridian was important, but it's not the end of the world. We've got other prospects, other opportunities. You've built this company from nothing. One missed deal doesn't change that." "I know. Do you? Because you sound like you're at a funeral." Lucas almost smiled. Monica had worked for him for 7 years. She'd seen him through expansions and contractions, through wins and losses, through the death of his father and the end of his only serious relationship. She was probably the closest thing he had to a friend, which said more about his life than he wanted to examine too closely. "I'm just tired," Lucas said. "It was a long couple of days. Go sleep. Take the rest of the day. We'll regroup tomorrow. There's the quarterly review, which I can handle. Lucas, go sleep." He wanted to argue, but the exhaustion hit him all at once. "Okay. And Lucas, stop beating yourself up. Sometimes things don't work out. That doesn't mean you failed." Lucas hung up and stared at his phone. "Stop beating yourself up. Easy advice. Impossible execution." He walked to his bedroom, lay down on top of the covers fully clothed, and closed his eyes. Sleep came surprisingly fast, pulling him under into a darkness that felt almost gentle. When he woke, it was after 3 in the afternoon. Lucas lay there for a moment, disoriented, before the past 2 days came flooding back. The airport, Emma, the note. He got up, splashed water on his face, and changed into different clothes. Then he did something he never did in the middle of a workday. He left his phone on the nightstand and went for a walk. The March air was cold and sharp, the kind of cold that made your lungs ache. Lucas walked without any particular destination, just moving. He passed the usual landmarks, the coffee shop where he sometimes stopped before work, the dry cleaner that had been pressing his shirts for 4 years, the restaurant where he'd taken clients dozens of times but never eaten alone. He ended up at Grant Park without meaning to. The paths were mostly empty, just a few runners and people walking dogs. Lucas found a bench near the lake and sat down. The water was gray and choppy, mirroring the sky. Lucas watched it for a while, not thinking about anything specific, just letting his mind wander in a way it rarely did. Emma had asked to borrow his car, and he'd said yes. That single decision had carved a line through his life, before and after. Before, he'd been certain about who he was and how the world worked. After, he wasn't sure of anything. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He'd brought it after all, apparently. Muscle memory. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Bennett? This is Carl, your driver. Just wanted to check in. You got out of my car pretty fast the other day. Hope everything turned out okay. Lucas stared at the message. Carl. He'd completely forgotten about Carl. Had left him sitting in traffic on the Kennedy without a word of explanation or follow-up. He typed back, Carl, sorry for bailing like that. Everything's fine. Thanks for checking in. The response came quickly. No problem, sir. Take care of yourself. Lucas pocketed the phone and went back to watching the water. Take care of yourself. When was the last time someone had said that to him? When was the last time he'd actually done it? He thought about Emma's note again. You saw someone who looked like a mess and a risk and probably a mistake, but you said yes anyway. Had he, though? Really seen her? Or had he just seen his own frustration and exhaustion reflected back at him? Someone else having a terrible day in a terminal full of terrible days? Lucas didn't have an answer. What he did have was a growing sense that the person he'd been 2 days ago wasn't someone he particularly wanted to keep being. His phone rang. Not a text this time. An actual call. Lucas pulled it out and saw his brother's name, David. Lucas almost didn't answer. David lived in Portland with his wife and 2 kids, working as a teacher and living the kind of life Lucas had never understood. Modest, messy, chaotic, and apparently happy. They talked maybe 4 times a year, mostly around holidays, but something made Lucas answer. Hey. Hey yourself. David sounded surprised. Wasn't sure you'd pick up. Why wouldn't I? Because it's 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, and you're usually in back-to-back meetings until 6. Lucas looked out at the lake. Not today. You sick? No, just taking a break. Silence on the other end. Then, who are you and what have you done with my brother? Funny. I'm serious. You don't take breaks. You once worked through pneumonia. That was one time. Lucas. David's voice shifted into something more serious. What's going on? And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the note still sitting in his apartment, or the fact that he was sitting alone on a bench watching cold water while the rest of the world moved around him. But Lucas found himself saying, I don't know. David waited. I had this deal, Lucas continued. Big deal. 2 years of work, and it fell through because of bad timing and bad luck, and 100 things I couldn't control. And I should be devastated. Should be figuring out how to fix it, or salvage it, or pivot to something else. But I'm just sitting here. That doesn't sound like you. I know. So what changed? Lucas thought about how to answer that. I met someone. At the airport. She asked me for help, and I helped her. And now I can't stop thinking about it. Okay. David drew the word out carefully. What kind of help? I let her borrow my car. Your Audi. Yeah. You let a stranger borrow your $50,000 car. She brought it back. Lucas, what the hell is going on? I don't know, Lucas said again. That's the problem. I don't know. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said carefully, Do you remember when Dad died? Lucas tensed. What does that have to do with anything? Just listen. After the funeral, you told me you were done letting things happen to you. That you were going to control everything you could control so you'd never be blindsided again. Remember? Lucas did remember. He'd been 28. His father had died of a heart attack at 62. No warning, no time to prepare, just there one day and gone the next. Lucas had stood at the funeral feeling like the ground had opened up beneath him, and he'd made a decision right there. No more surprises. No more losing things he couldn't afford to lose. I remember, Lucas said quietly. And you've spent the last 14 years doing exactly that. Building a life where everything is predictable and managed and safe. And maybe that worked for a while. But Lucas, you don't sound happy. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're sitting on a bench in the middle of a workday telling me you let a stranger borrow your car, and you sound like you're trying to figure out if you're having a breakdown or a breakthrough. Lucas wanted to argue. Wanted to tell David he didn't understand that building a stable, successful life wasn't some kind of psychological problem to solve. But the words wouldn't come. I'm not saying quit your job and move to an ashram, David continued. I'm just saying maybe this thing with the stranger and the car, maybe that's not the weird part. Maybe the weird part is that it took something that dramatic to make you feel something. Lucas closed his eyes. When did you get so insightful? I have kids. They don't let you hide from anything. How are they? Good, loud. Katie's learning piano, which means our house sounds like a crime scene. Ben's obsessed with dinosaurs. They ask about you. Tell them I said hi. Why don't you come visit? Actually see them? I'm busy. You're always busy. That's the point I'm trying to make. Lucas didn't respond. David sighed. Look, I'm not trying to solve your life. I just think maybe whatever happened at that airport was important. Maybe don't ignore it. I'm not ignoring it. Good. Then do something about it. They talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, then hung up. Lucas sat on the bench until the cold became uncomfortable, then walked back to his apartment. The note was still sitting on the kitchen counter where he'd left it. Lucas picked it up and read it again, slowly this time, paying attention to every word. You gave me a reason to believe I'm still worth trusting. He thought about Emma. Wherever she was now, whatever she was doing, she'd said she was getting clean, had a job lined up, was fighting to get her daughter back. She was building something from nothing, just like he had. Except her version required a different kind of courage. The courage to admit she'd failed and try again anyway. Lucas had never failed at anything he couldn't spin into a learning experience or strategic pivot, had never let himself get close enough to failure for it to actually matter. Until Meridian. And even that felt less like failure and more like relief. His phone buzzed. Monica. Heads up. Richard Meridian just called. Wants to have coffee tomorrow. Didn't say why. Want me to schedule it? Lucas stared at the message. Richard wanted to meet. Which probably meant the deal wasn't completely dead, which meant there was still a chance to salvage this. Lucas typed, "What time?" He suggested 9 a.m. at that place near his office. Tell him yes. Done. Okay? Yeah. See you tomorrow. Lucas set the phone down and looked at Emma's note again. She'd driven 8 hours to see her daughter for a few hours, had risked everything on a stranger's kindness because she refused to miss her daughter's birthday. What was Lucas willing to risk? What was he willing to drive 8 hours for? He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find one. The rest of the evening passed in a strange kind of stillness. Lucas ordered food he didn't really taste, watched television he didn't really see, and eventually went to bed around 11. Sleep came harder this time. His mind kept circling back to the airport, to Emma's face when she'd asked to borrow his car, to the way she'd looked at him like she was testing something important. He woke at 6 the next morning feeling unrested but alert. The coffee meeting with Richard was at 9. Lucas showered, dressed in the charcoal suit he always wore to important meetings, and checked his reflection in the mirror. He looked the same as always, professional, controlled, successful, empty. Lucas pushed the thought away and headed to the office. Monica was already at her desk when he arrived, a coffee waiting for him. You look terrible, she said by way of greeting. Good morning to you too. I'm serious. When's the last time you actually slept? Last night. For how long? Lucas didn't answer. Monica shook her head and handed him a folder. Here's everything you need for the Meridian meeting. Updated projections, revised timeline, alternative proposals if he pushes back on the original terms. Thanks. Lucas. Monica waited until he looked at her. What's your goal here? Get the deal back on track. Is that what you want? Lucas frowned. Of course. Why wouldn't I? Monica studied him for a long moment. No reason, just asking. Lucas took the folder and went to his office. He had 90 minutes before the meeting. He should have been reviewing the materials, preparing talking points, anticipating objections. Instead, he found himself staring at the skyline and thinking about Emma. She'd asked for help, and he'd given it. No agenda, no expectation of return. Just one person helping another because they could. When was the last time Lucas had done anything without calculating the return on investment? At 8:45, Lucas grabbed his coat and headed out. The coffee shop was a 10-minute walk, and he arrived exactly on time. Richard Meridian was already there, sitting at a corner table with an espresso and his phone. He looked up when Lucas approached and smiled. Lucas, thanks for meeting me. Of course. Lucas sat down and ordered a coffee from the passing server. I was surprised to hear from you. I'm sure. Richard set his phone face down on the table. Look, I'm going to be direct because I think we've worked together long enough to skip the bullshit. The other presentation happened yesterday. And it was fine. Professional, thorough, everything you'd expect. Lucas waited. But it wasn't you, Richard continued, and my team noticed. We've been working with Bennett Logistics for 2 years. We know your operation. We trust your operation. Bringing in someone new at this stage feels like starting over. So what are you saying? I'm saying the deal's still on the table if you want it. Same terms, same timeline. We were reacting to the circumstances, not the relationship. Lucas should have felt triumph, relief. This was everything he'd wanted 3 days ago. What about the group that presented yesterday? We'll tell them thanks, but no thanks. Richard leaned back. Look, I get it. The airport situation was a nightmare. These things happen, but you've never let us down before, and I don't think you will now. So what do you say? Lucas looked at Richard, thought about the contracts, the revenue, the expansion into the Midwest market, thought about what this deal meant for Bennett Logistics, thought about the fact that he'd spent 2 years building toward this exact moment. And then he thought about Emma's note. You gave me more than a car. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Richard blinked. Sure. Why logistics? Why this business? What do you mean? I mean, you didn't have to go into supply chain management. You could have done anything. Why this? Richard looked confused. Because it's what my father did. The company's been in the family for 40 years. Do you like it? Like it? I don't know. It's work. It pays well. It's stable. Richard frowned. Why are we talking about this? Lucas didn't have a good answer. No reason. Just curious. Okay. Richard shook his head slightly, like clearing away confusion. So are we doing this or not? Lucas opened his mouth to say yes. The word was right there, simple and straightforward. This was what he'd worked for, what he'd built his entire life around. But what came out instead was, can I have 24 hours to think about it? Richard's expression shifted. Think about it? Lucas, this is what you wanted. What changed? Nothing. I just need a day. Is this a negotiating tactic? Because if you're trying to get better terms, it's not that. Lucas stood up. I just need a day. I'll call you tomorrow with an answer. He left before Richard could respond, walking out into the cold March morning with absolutely no idea what he'd just done or why. His phone rang before he'd made it 3 blocks. Monica. What the hell happened? She demanded. Richard just called me saying you walked out of the meeting. I asked for 24 hours. To think about what? Lucas, this is the deal. The one we've been working toward for 2 years. I know. Then what's the problem? Lucas stopped walking. People flowed around him on the sidewalk, everyone moving with purpose toward destinations they were certain about. I don't know if I want it anymore. Silence on the other end. Then, you're joking. I'm not. Lucas, listen to me. You're exhausted. You had a rough couple of days. But you can't throw away 2 years of work because you're having some kind of existential crisis. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just taking a day to think. About what? About whether this is what I actually want or just what I've convinced myself I should want. More silence. Then Monica said, very quietly, I have no idea what's going on with you right now. That makes 2 of us. Lucas hung up and kept walking. He didn't go back to the office, didn't go home, just walked, block after block, until he found himself at the same bench in Grant Park where he'd sat yesterday. He pulled out his phone and looked at Emma's text thread. The last message was from him. Drive safe. Lucas stared at it for a long time. Then he typed, How's it going? He almost deleted it. They weren't friends. They'd met once. She'd borrowed his car and given it back, and that was the end of the story. But he hit send anyway. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Lucas was about to give up when his phone buzzed. Good. Strange. I got to the job today. Restaurant. Just washing dishes, but it's honest work, feels like starting over. Lucas typed, Starting over can be good, can be terrifying too. Yeah. How are you doing? Lucas looked out at the lake. The water was calmer today, almost smooth. Trying to figure some things out. About what? Whether the life I built is the life I actually want. The response came quickly. That's a hard question. You have any answers? Not really. Just know that sometimes you have to break things to fix them. Lucas read the message 3 times. Did you break things on purpose? A long pause. Then, no, I broke them by accident, but fixing them on purpose. Lucas smiled despite himself. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's better than staying broken. They texted back and forth for another few minutes, about nothing important, just the small details of starting over and facing uncertainty. Then Emma said she had to get back to work. Lucas sat on the bench for another hour, watching the lake and thinking about broken things and what it cost to fix them. By the time he walked back to his apartment, he still didn't have an answer about Richard's deal. But he had something else, a sense that maybe not knowing was okay, that maybe the questions mattered more than the answers. His phone buzzed one more time as he unlocked his door. Emma, thanks for checking in. It helped. Lucas typed back, anytime. And he meant it. The 24 hours Lucas had asked for stretched ahead like an open highway with no destination in sight. He spent the rest of that afternoon in his apartment, trying to work, trying to think, mostly just staring at his laptop screen while his mind went in circles. By evening, he gave up pretending to be productive. He ordered Thai food he barely touched, poured a glass of bourbon he didn't finish, and sat by the window watching the city lights blink on as dusk settled over Chicago. Somewhere down there, millions of people were living their lives, going to dinner, heading home from work, picking up kids from daycare, making choices that seemed obvious to them. Lucas couldn't remember the last time anything had seemed obvious. His phone sat on the armrest of the chair, silent. Monica hadn't called back after their conversation this morning. She was probably giving him space, or maybe she was just tired of trying to decode whatever the hell was happening to him. Lucas couldn't blame her. He was tired of it too. Around 9, his phone finally did ring. Not Monica. David. Calling to check if I've joined a cult yet? Lucas asked. Have you? Not yet. Day's not over. David laughed. I'm calling because Sarah said I should. She said leaving you alone after yesterday's conversation was a bad idea. Sarah's very perceptive. She is, which is why I married her. So, are you okay? Lucas looked out at the city. Define okay. Not having a breakdown, not planning to do anything stupid. Then, yes, I'm okay. That didn't sound convincing. Lucas took a breath. I'm supposed to give an answer tomorrow about this deal I told you about, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. What does your gut tell you? My gut is apparently broken. It keeps telling me to walk away from something I spent 2 years building. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe it's just telling you something you don't want to hear. Lucas rubbed his face. When did everyone in my life become an amateur therapist? When you started acting like someone who needs therapy. David paused. Look, I don't know anything about your business, but I know you, and you've never been uncertain about anything in your entire life. So if you're uncertain about this, maybe that's information. What kind of information? The kind that says maybe the problem isn't the deal. Maybe it's why you wanted it in the first place. Lucas didn't respond. David let the silence sit for a moment, then said, You remember when you came to visit 3 years ago for Ben's birthday? Yeah. You spent the whole weekend checking your phone. You were there, but you weren't there. And at one point, Katie asked Sarah why Uncle Lucas was sad. She was 4. 4-year-olds can tell when something's wrong. I wasn't sad. You were. You still are. You've just gotten really good at pretending you're not. Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. What do you want me to say, David? I don't want you to say anything. I just want you to be honest with yourself about what you actually want. Not what you think you should want. What you actually want. And if I don't know? Then maybe that stranger with the car did you a favor. Maybe she showed you that you've been running on autopilot for so long you forgot there were other ways to fly. Lucas closed his eyes. That's very poetic. Sarah helped me write it. Despite everything, Lucas almost smiled. Tell her thanks. Come visit. Seriously, take a weekend. The kids would love it. I'll think about it. That means no. It means I'll think about it. They hung up a few minutes later. Lucas sat in the dark for a long time after, David's words echoing in his head. You've been running on autopilot. Was that true? Lucas tried to remember the last time he'd made a decision based on something other than logic and strategy. The last time he'd wanted something just because he wanted it, not because it fit into some larger plan. The only thing that came to mind was handing Emma his car keys. Lucas pulled out his phone and opened their text thread. Her last message. Thanks for checking in. It helped. He wanted to text her again, wanted to ask her how she'd known it was time to start over, how she'd found the courage to rebuild something from nothing, how she managed to keep going when everything was uncertain. But he didn't. They barely knew each other. She had her own life to figure out. She didn't need some stranger using her as a sounding board for his quarter-life crisis, or whatever this was. Midlife? Three-quarter life? Lucas set the phone down and went to bed. Sleep came in fragments, broken by periods of staring at the ceiling and rehearsing conversations with Richard that never sounded right. Morning arrived cold and gray. Lucas got up, showered, made coffee, and still had no idea what he was going to say when he called Richard. The clock on his microwave read 7:42 a.m. He had a few hours before he needed to give an answer. His phone rang at 7:58. Monica. Before you say anything, she started, I'm not calling to pressure you. I'm calling because I've worked with you for 7 years, and I've never seen you like this. Like what? Lost. And I need to know if this is about the Meridian deal or if it's about something bigger. Lucas leaned against the kitchen counter. Honestly, I don't know. Okay, then let me ask a different question. If this deal falls through, if you walk away, what happens to Bennett Logistics? We survive. We have other clients, other contracts in the pipeline. It would hurt, but we'd recover. And what happens to you? Lucas didn't answer right away. Monica waited. I don't know, he finally said. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Monica sighed. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. You know that, right? But Lucas, you need to decide. You can't just live in this limbo forever. I know. Do you? Because it kind of seems like you're trying to avoid making a choice by pretending you're still thinking about it. The words hit harder than Lucas expected. Maybe I am. Then stop. Call Richard. Say yes or say no, but say something. She hung up before Lucas could respond. He stared at his phone, then at the coffee cooling in his cup, then at nothing in particular. Monica was right. He couldn't keep delaying. Richard deserved an answer. His company deserved clarity. And Lucas deserved to stop torturing himself with hypotheticals. He picked up his phone and dialed Richard's number. It rang 3 times. Lucas, right on time. I like to be predictable. Usually. Richard's tone was friendly but guarded. So, what's the verdict? Lucas opened his mouth. The word yes was right there, ready to go. It would be easy. It would make everyone happy. It would restore order to a situation that had become unnecessarily complicated. But what came out was, I can't do it. Silence on the other end. Then, can't or won't? Both, neither, I don't know. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, Richard. This should be a simple yes. And 2 weeks ago it would have been. But something's changed, and I can't give you the kind of focus and commitment this deal deserves right now. Is this about money? Because if you need better terms, it's not about money. Then what is it about? Lucas looked out the window. I think I've been building the wrong life. Another long silence. Then Richard said carefully, That's pretty heavy for a Wednesday morning. Yeah. And you're sure about this? Because once I hang up this phone, the offer's off the table. I'm sure. Lucas was surprised to realize it was true. I'm sorry, you deserved better than this. I deserved a straight answer 2 days ago, but hey, better late than never. Richard didn't sound angry, just tired. Good luck with whatever you're figuring out, Lucas. Thanks. And Richard, the other company that presented, they'll do good work for you. Yeah, I'm sure they will. The line went dead. Lucas set his phone down and stared at it like it might explain what he'd just done. He'd walked away from a $20 million deal, had said no to the exact thing he'd spent 2 years chasing, had just proven Monica's point about self-sabotage in the most spectacular way possible. And yet, Lucas waited for the panic to hit, for the regret to flood in. But what he felt instead was something lighter, something that felt almost like relief. His phone rang again. Monica. He answered. I just got off the phone with Richard's assistant, she said flatly. Want to explain to me what the hell just happened? I told him no. I got that part. What I'm asking is why. Because it was the wrong deal. Lucas, it was $20 million. There's no such thing as the wrong $20 million. There is if you're only doing it because you think you're supposed to. Monica was quiet for a moment. So what now? I don't know. That's not a business plan. I know. Lucas. Her voice softened. I need to understand what's happening here, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're throwing away everything we've built. I'm not throwing anything away. Bennett Logistics is fine. We have good clients, good contracts, good people. We'll be fine. But will you? Lucas didn't have an answer for that. Monica seemed to sense it. Take the rest of the week, she said. Figure out whatever you need to figure out. I'll handle things at the office. Monica, I mean it. You're clearly going through something, and I'd rather you deal with it now than have it blow up in 6 months when we're in the middle of something critical. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. When you come back, we're having a very long conversation about what the hell is going on. She hung up. Lucas set the phone down and looked around his apartment. It was barely 8:30 in the morning, and he had absolutely nothing he needed to do. No meetings, no calls, no deadlines. For the first time in 14 years, Lucas's calendar was completely empty. The feeling was disorienting, liberating, terrifying. He grabbed his coat and left the apartment before he could overthink it. The streets were busy with people heading to work, to appointments, to lives that had structure and purpose. Lucas walked among them, anonymous and unmoored, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was 20 years old: possibility. He ended up at a coffee shop he'd never been to, 3 blocks from his building. It was small and crowded, with mismatched furniture and art on the walls that looked like it had been done by local students. Lucas ordered a coffee and found a seat by the window. 2 women at the next table were arguing about a movie. Behind him, someone was on a video call trying to explain something technical while their toddler sang the alphabet in the background. At the counter, a man was flirting badly with the barista, who was politely humoring him. Lucas watched it all and felt like he was seeing the world for the first time. Or maybe seeing it clearly for the first time in a long time. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mr. Bennett? This is Emma. I hope it's okay that I'm texting. I wanted to ask you something. Lucas typed back, It's fine, what's up? This is going to sound weird, but did something happen to you after the airport? You seem different in your texts. Lucas stared at the message. How could she possibly know that? They'd exchanged maybe a dozen texts total, none of them particularly revealing. He typed, How can you tell? I don't know. Just a feeling. You sound less careful, if that makes sense. It did make sense. Lucas typed, I walked away from something today. Something I thought I wanted. That's brave. Or stupid. Maybe both. Most brave things are. Lucas smiled despite himself. How's the job going? Hard. My feet hurt and my hands are raw from the dish soap. But I showed up on time and nobody yelled at me, so I'm calling it a win. That's a good way to measure success. What's yours? Lucas looked out the window at the people passing by. I'm still figuring that out. Let me know when you do. I could use some ideas. They texted back and forth for a few minutes. About work, about starting over, about how hard it was to build something new when you were still carrying the weight of what came before. Emma had to go when her break ended, but before she did, she sent one more message. For what it's worth, I think you're going to figure it out. You're the kind of person who helps strangers. That says something about who you are underneath all the careful planning. Lucas read the message 3 times. Then he pocketed his phone and finished his coffee. The rest of the day unfolded without structure. Lucas walked. He sat in parks. He ate lunch at a sandwich shop where the owner argued with a customer about baseball in a way that suggested they'd been having the same argument for 20 years. He watched people live their small, ordinary lives and felt something shift in his chest. By the time evening came, Lucas found himself back in his apartment with no clear idea of what he'd accomplished. He hadn't solved anything, hadn't made any brilliant realizations, had just existed for a day without schedules or objectives. And somehow, it felt like progress. His phone rang around 7. David. Sarah wants to know if you're still alive, he said. Tell her I'm still alive. She also wants to know if you made a decision about the deal. I did. I walked away. Silence. Then, seriously? Seriously? Holy shit, Lucas. Yeah. How do you feel? Lucas thought about it. Terrified, relieved, uncertain, all of it at once. That sounds about right, David paused. So what now? I have no idea. That's the scary part. Or the exciting part. When did you become such an optimist? When I stopped trying to control everything and started just living. You should try it sometime. Lucas almost laughed. I'm working on it. Good, because that offer to visit still stands. Come spend a weekend with people who have no idea what they're doing and are fine with it. I'll think about it. You keep saying that. I mean it this time. After they hung up, Lucas made himself dinner. Actual cooking, not ordering in. Nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, but the act of making something with his hands felt oddly grounding. He ate slowly, tasting the food instead of just consuming it, and cleaned up afterward without the usual sense that he was wasting time he should be spending on work. Later, lying in bed, Lucas pulled out his phone and looked at Emma's texts again. You're the kind of person who helps strangers. Was he, though? Or had that been a one-time thing? A moment of temporary insanity brought on by exhaustion and frustration? Lucas wanted to believe he was that person, the kind who trusted people, who took chances, who didn't need everything mapped out and risk-assessed before making a move. But wanting to be someone and actually being them were different things. His phone buzzed. Emma. Still awake? Lucas typed. Yeah, you? Can't sleep. Thinking too much. About what? Everything. My daughter. The job. Whether I'm strong enough to actually do this. You are. You don't know that. You drove 8 hours to see your daughter on her birthday. You asked a stranger for help when you needed it. You're showing up to a job that hurts your feet and makes your hands raw. You're doing the work. That's what strong looks like. A long pause. Then, thank you. I needed to hear that. Anytime. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. What are you scared of? Lucas stared at the question. What was he scared of? He could give the easy answer, failure, loss, uncertainty, but Emma deserved better than that. He typed, I'm scared that if I stop controlling everything, I'll discover there's nothing underneath, that the person I've built myself into is all there is. The response came quickly. There's more. I saw it at the airport. That's why I asked you for help. What did you see? Someone who wanted to believe in something, who was tired of being alone. Lucas read the message 3 times, feeling something crack open in his chest. Am I wrong? Emma typed. No, you're not wrong. They texted for another hour, about fear and courage and what it meant to start over, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about how hard it was to trust yourself when you'd spent years learning not to. Eventually, Emma said she needed to try to sleep. She had an early shift tomorrow. They said goodnight, and Lucas set his phone down. But he didn't feel alone. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like someone actually saw him. Not the successful CEO or the controlled professional or the man who had everything figured out. Just Lucas, scared and uncertain and trying to figure out what came next, and somehow that felt like enough. The next morning, Lucas woke with something he hadn't felt in years. Energy. Not the forced, coffee-fueled energy that got him through 14-hour workdays, but actual energy. The kind that made him want to get up and do something. He went for a run along the lake, something he hadn't done since college. His lungs burned and his legs protested, but he pushed through, feeling the cold air clear his head in a way that no amount of strategic planning ever had. When he got back to his apartment, there was a voicemail from Monica. It's me. I know you're taking the week, but I wanted to let you know. 3 of our mid-tier clients called asking about the Meridian situation. Word travels fast. They want reassurance that we're stable. I can handle it, but I need to know what to tell them. Call me when you can. Lucas listened to the message twice. This was the consequence of his decision. Not immediate disaster, but ripples spreading outward. Clients getting nervous. Staff wondering what was happening. The careful structure he'd built starting to shift. He should have felt panic. Should have been immediately strategizing damage control. Instead, he felt clear. For the first time in 2 years, he could see his business for what it actually was. Not the thing that defined him, but a thing he'd built. Important, but not everything. Worth saving, but not worth sacrificing himself for. Lucas called Monica back. "You survived the run," she said by way of greeting. "I have your GPS location turned on. Very stalkery of me, I know. I'll make sure to commit all my crimes outside the city limits." "Good plan. So, did you listen to my message?" "I did. And I have an answer for the clients, but you're not going to like it." Monica sighed. "Hit me. Tell them the truth. Tell them we walked away from a deal that wasn't the right fit. Tell them Bennett Logistics is evolving, and part of that evolution means being more selective about the partnerships we pursue." That's corporate speak for "our CEO is having an identity crisis." It's corporate speak for "we're making strategic decisions based on long-term values instead of short-term revenue." Which is true. Is it? Because from here it looks like you're making it up as you go. Maybe I am, but maybe that's not the worst thing. Monica was quiet for a long moment. "You're really doing this. Whatever this is." "I am." "Okay. Then I'm with you. But Lucas, at some point you're going to need to figure out what comes next. You can't just run along the lake and text mysterious strangers forever. She's not mysterious. Her name is Emma." "Oh, is that what this is about? You met someone?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Lucas thought about how to answer. "It's like, she reminded me that there are other ways to live, that I don't have to have everything figured out before I make a move." That sounds suspiciously like a midlife crisis. "I'm 42. That's not midlife." It is if you plan to live to 84. Despite everything, Lucas laughed. "I'll take the rest of the week, but I'll be reachable if anything urgent comes up." "Nothing's urgent. It's all just work. Take your time." They hung up, and Lucas stood in his kitchen, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, space to breathe. His phone buzzed. "Emma. Survived my second day. Only dropped 3 plates. Manager says that's pretty good for a beginner." Lucas smiled and typed back. "That's excellent for a beginner. I would have dropped 6. You've never worked in a restaurant, have you?" "How can you tell?" "Just a hunch." "What did you do today?" "Went for a run. Made some decisions about work, tried to figure out what I'm doing with my life." "Any luck with that last one?" "Not yet. Still working on it. Let me know if you figure it out." "I'll take notes." They texted throughout the day, small updates, random observations, the kind of conversation that didn't go anywhere but somehow still mattered. Emma told him about a regular customer who left a 50-cent tip on a $40 bill. Lucas told her about watching 2 pigeons fight over a French fry in the park. It was ordinary, mundane, and somehow it felt more real than most of the conversations Lucas had had in years. By evening, Lucas found himself thinking about David's invitation to visit Portland, about meeting his niece and nephew properly instead of being the distant uncle who showed up for birthdays and checked his phone the whole time. He pulled out his phone and texted David. "That offer to visit, still open?" The response came immediately. "Always." "When?" "Next weekend?" "Seriously?" "Seriously," Sarah just screamed. "The kids are already planning activities. You just made their year." Lucas smiled. "Tell them I'm looking forward to it." "Will do." "And Lucas, I'm proud of you." Lucas stared at the message for a long time. When was the last time someone had said they were proud of him? When was the last time he'd done something worth being proud of? He didn't have an answer. But sitting in his apartment with an empty calendar and an uncertain future, Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in 14 years. He felt like himself. The week that followed moved differently than any Lucas could remember. Time stretched and contracted in strange ways. Mornings felt longer, evenings arrived faster, and the hours in between filled themselves with things that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or conference calls or growth projections. He went to the office on Thursday, mostly because Monica had texted him that the staff was starting to worry he'd died or joined a commune. Lucas walked in at 10 instead of his usual 7:30, and the look on people's faces told him everything he needed to know about how unusual that was. Monica was waiting at his office door with coffee and an expression somewhere between concern and exasperation. "You look different," she said. "I showered and everything." "That's not what I mean." She studied him. "You look I don't know, less stressed. It's weird. Lucas sat down at his desk and took the coffee. Thanks? I'm serious. In 7 years, I've never seen you look relaxed. It's throwing me off. Monica sat across from him. So, are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to keep guessing? Nothing's going on. Lucas, you walked away from Meridian. You took a week off with zero notice. You're texting someone named Emma approximately 40 times a day. Don't look at me like that. Your phone buzzes on your desk constantly. Something is very clearly going on. Lucas set his coffee down. I'm trying to figure out what matters. And? I don't have an answer yet. Monica leaned back in her chair. Okay, then let me ask a different question. What are you doing here? You texted me that people were worried. No, I mean, what are you doing here? At Bennett Logistics. If you're having this whole existential crisis about whether this is the life you want, why are you still showing up? It was a fair question. Lucas looked around his office. The awards on the wall, the photos from industry conferences, the degree from Wharton that he'd spent $60,000 in 2 years of his life earning. All of it felt like evidence from someone else's life. Because I built this, Lucas said finally, and I'm not ready to walk away from it completely. Not yet. But you might? I don't know. Maybe. Monica absorbed this in silence. Then she said, if you decide to sell or step back or whatever it is you're thinking about, I need advance notice. I have a mortgage and 2 kids in college. I can't just wing it. I know. And I promise, if I make any major decisions, you'll be the first to know. Thank you. Monica stood up. Also, for what it's worth, I think whatever you're going through is probably healthy. You've been running yourself into the ground for years. Maybe it's good that you're finally asking whether any of it matters. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You were just too busy to notice. She headed for the door, then turned back. And Lucas, this Emma person, be careful. People who show up in airports and change your whole worldview are either exactly what you need or a complete disaster. There's no middle ground. After she left, Lucas sat at his desk for a long time, staring at nothing. His inbox had 247 unread messages. His calendar showed meetings he'd missed, calls he hadn't returned, decisions that were waiting for him to make them. He should have felt overwhelmed. Instead, he felt oddly detached, like he was looking at someone else's life through a window. His phone buzzed. Emma, question. When you're trying to rebuild your life, are you supposed to feel terrified the whole time, or does that eventually go away? Lucas smiled and typed back. Pretty sure the terror is how you know you're doing it right. That's not comforting. I know, but it's honest. Fair enough. How's work? Weird. I feel like an imposter in my own office. That's called growth. Or a mental breakdown. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Lucas laughed out loud. A passing employee glanced through his office window, looking startled. Lucas couldn't remember the last time someone had heard him laugh at work. He typed, how's the restaurant? Exhausting, but I got my first full paycheck today. It's not much, but it's mine. Feels like winning the lottery. That's huge. Congratulations. Thanks. It's weird how good it feels to earn something honestly, even if it's just minimum wage and dish soap burns. Lucas thought about his own paycheck, the direct deposits that showed up every 2 weeks, large enough that he barely noticed them anymore. When had money stopped meaning anything? When had success become just a number on a spreadsheet instead of something worth celebrating? He spent the rest of Thursday dealing with the most urgent items in his inbox, then left at 4. People stared. Lucas pretended not to notice. That evening, he went to the bookstore. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been in a bookstore that wasn't an Airport Hudson News. This one was small and crowded, with narrow aisles and the smell of old paper and coffee. Lucas wandered through the sections with no plan, picking up books at random and reading first pages. He ended up buying 3 novels and a book about hiking the Appalachian Trail, none of which had anything to do with business or leadership or optimization. At the register, the clerk, a woman in her 60s with paint-stained fingers, smiled at his selections. Good choices, she said. You look like someone who needs an escape. Is it that obvious? Honey, everyone who walks through that door needs an escape. That's what books are for. She rang up his purchase. The hiking book, though, that one's different. That's for people who want to do something instead of just read about it. Lucas took the bag. What if I'm not sure which one I am? Then you're in the right place. Books help you figure that out. He walked home instead of taking a cab, carrying his books and thinking about the woman's words. Do something instead of just read about it. Lucas had spent his entire adult life doing, building, expanding, optimizing, growing. But had any of it been what he actually wanted to do? Or had he just been checking boxes on someone else's list of what success looked like? His phone rang. David, calling to make sure you didn't bail on next weekend, his brother said. I'm not bailing. Good. Because I already told the kids and Katie's been practicing a song on the piano to play for you. It's terrible, but you have to act like it's amazing. I can do that. Also, Sarah wants to know if you have any dietary restrictions we should know about. No, I eat everything. Even vegetables? Even vegetables. Wow, growth, David paused. You sound different. Everyone keeps saying that. Because it's true. You sound like you're not carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders for once. Lucas thought about the past week, about Emma's note, about walking away from Meridian, about the strange lightness that came from not knowing what happened next. Maybe I'm not. Good. It's about time. We'll pick you up from the airport Friday evening. Don't bring work. I'm serious. If I see you on a laptop, I'm throwing it in the river. What river? I'll find one. Don't test me. After they hung up, Lucas sat on his couch and pulled out one of the novels he'd bought. He read for 2 hours without checking his phone once, letting himself get lost in someone else's story. When he finally looked up, it was after 10 and his neck hurt from reading in a bad position. It felt good. Friday morning, Lucas went back to the office to tie up loose ends before his trip. Monica had prepared a briefing packet, status updates on current projects, decisions that needed his input, problems that might arise while he was gone. This is a weekend trip, not a sabbatical, Lucas said, flipping through the pages. I know, but you've never taken a personal weekend in the entire time I've worked here. I want to make sure you don't feel compelled to check in every 6 hours. I won't. Monica raised an eyebrow. I'll believe it when I see it. Lucas spent the morning in meetings that felt simultaneously important and completely meaningless. People talked about market share and quarterly targets and competitive advantages, and Lucas heard himself participating in the discussion while some other part of his brain wondered when he'd started caring more about market share than about the actual people doing the work. At lunch, he walked to the sandwich place where the owner argued about baseball. The man, whose name Lucas had learned was Frank, was behind the counter as usual. You're back, Frank said. Thought maybe you got tired of my commentary. Your sandwiches are worth the commentary. Damn right they are. Turkey and Swiss. Please. While Frank made the sandwich, Lucas watched the flow of customers, construction workers ordering in bulk, office workers grabbing quick lunches, a woman with a toddler who kept trying to touch everything. Normal people living normal lives. When had Lucas stopped being one of them? Frank slid the sandwich across the counter. You look different than last time you were here. Why does everyone keep saying that? Because it's true. Last time you looked like you were being chased by something. Now you just look tired. Is that better? Hell yes. Tired you can fix with sleep. Being chased never stops unless you turn around and deal with whatever's after you. Lucas paid and took his sandwich to a small park 2 blocks away. He ate slowly, watching pigeons fight over crumbs and listening to 2 old men argue about politics on the next bench. The sun was out for the first time in days, weak but persistent. His phone buzzed. Emma, big day. Meeting with the social worker this afternoon. If it goes well, I might get supervised visits with my daughter. If it doesn't, I don't know. Trying not to think about it. Lucas typed, It's going to go well. You've been doing everything right. Have I, though? I'm working minimum wage, living in a halfway house, trying to rebuild my life from scratch. What if they think that's not enough? They won't. They'll see someone who's fighting, someone who showed up. That matters more than having everything perfect. A long pause. Then, when did you get so optimistic? About 3 days ago, still getting used to it. Well, I like it. Thanks for the pep talk. I'll text you after. Good luck. Lucas put his phone away and finished his sandwich. He thought about Emma sitting in some office, waiting to hear whether she'd earned the right to see her own daughter. About how much courage it took to keep showing up when the outcome was uncertain. About the difference between his own comfortable crisis and her desperate fight for something that actually mattered. The rest of Friday passed in a blur of final meetings and preparations. By 5 o'clock, Lucas was in a cab heading to O'Hare, his small overnight bag in the seat next to him. He'd packed light, jeans, casual shirts, nothing that required a tie or dress shoes. The clothes felt foreign, like a costume for someone else's life. The plane was half empty. Lucas had a window seat and spent the flight staring at the clouds below, thinking about nothing and everything. Somewhere down there, Emma was meeting with a social worker. David was making dinner for his family. Monica was probably still at the office, handling things Lucas used to think only he could handle. And Lucas was 30,000 feet in the air, flying toward a weekend with people he barely knew anymore, with no agenda and no plan. It should have felt irresponsible. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. They landed in Portland at 8:30 local time. Lucas turned his phone off airplane mode and found a text from Emma. It went well, really well. I get supervised visits starting next week, 2 hours every Saturday. It's not much, but it's everything. Lucas felt something warm spread through his chest. He typed, "That's incredible. I'm so happy for you. I cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Happy crying. Didn't know that was possible. It is. Trust me. Where are you? Portland, visiting my brother and his family. That's good. Everyone needs family. Yeah, I'm starting to remember that." Lucas pocketed his phone and headed to baggage claim. David was waiting near the carousel, looking exactly like Lucas remembered. Same messy hair, same slightly too casual clothes, same easy smile that Lucas had never been able to replicate. "There he is," David said, pulling Lucas into a hug. "The prodigal brother returns. I was just here 3 years ago. 3 years is forever in kid time. Come on, everyone's waiting in the car." They walked to the parking garage. David talking the whole way about nothing important, about traffic and weather and the new restaurant that had opened near their house. Easy conversation that didn't require Lucas to be anyone other than exactly who he was. The car was a minivan, which somehow made perfect sense. Sarah was in the driver's seat, looking exactly as Lucas remembered. Blonde hair pulled back, tired but warm smile. The kind of person who made you feel welcome just by existing. "Lucas!" She got out and hugged him. "I'm so glad you came. Thanks for having me." "Are you kidding? You just made these two the most popular kids in school. Uncle Lucas from Chicago who does important business things." "I don't think I do important business things anymore." Sarah and David exchanged a look. "We'll talk about that later," David said. "Right now, say hi to the Munchkins." Lucas turned to the back seat. Katie was 7 now, with her mother's blonde hair and her father's smile. Ben was 9, all knees and elbows and serious expression behind glasses. "Hi, Uncle Lucas," Katie said shyly. "Hi, Katie. I hear you've been learning piano." Her face lit up. "I can play 3 whole songs now. Well, 2.5. The third one is still hard." "I'd love to hear them." Ben studied Lucas seriously. "Dad says you're having a midlife crisis." "Ben," Sarah spun around. "We talked about this." "It's okay," Lucas said, smiling despite himself. "Your dad might be right." "What's a midlife crisis?" Katie asked. "It's when grown-ups realize they've been doing everything wrong and have to start over," Ben said with the confidence of someone who'd clearly looked it up. "That's not," David started, but Lucas interrupted. "Actually, that's pretty accurate." The drive to David's house took 30 minutes through neighborhoods that looked nothing like Chicago. Trees everywhere, houses with yards, streets quiet enough that you could hear crickets. David and Sarah's place was a 2-story craftsman with a porch and a yard where a basketball hoop stood next to a vegetable garden that had seen better days. "Home sweet chaos," David said, pulling into the driveway. Inside the house was exactly what Lucas expected. Lived in, cluttered in a comfortable way, full of kid art and family photos and evidence of actual life happening. It was the opposite of Lucas's sterile apartment, and he felt something in his chest both tighten and loosen at the same time. "You're in the guest room upstairs," Sarah said. "Bathroom's across the hall. Make yourself at home. Dinner's in 20 minutes. Lucas took his bag upstairs and found the guest room. Simple, clean, with a quilt on the bed that looked handmade. He set his bag down and looked out the window at the neighborhood. Kids were playing in a yard across the street. An older couple walked a dog. Everything moved at a pace that felt almost foreign. His phone buzzed. "Emma." Just got done telling everyone at the house about the visits. They're actually happy for me. It feels weird to have people be happy for me. Lucas typed, "Get used to it. You earned it. So did you. Whatever you're figuring out in Portland, I'm not figuring anything out. I'm just visiting family." That is figuring something out. Trust me. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Katie talked nonstop about piano and school and her best friend who was moving away. Ben asked Lucas approximately 40 questions about Chicago, airplanes, tall buildings, and whether he'd ever met anyone famous. Sarah orchestrated everything with the skill of someone who'd learned to manage chaos through experience rather than force. David kept catching Lucas's eye across the table, smiling like he knew something Lucas didn't yet. After dinner, Katie insisted on playing her piano pieces. Lucas sat on the couch while she worked through Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Mary Had a Little Lamb, with intense concentration and several wrong notes. When she finished, she turned to Lucas with hopeful eyes. "That was beautiful," Lucas said, and meant it. "Really? Really? I couldn't do that." "You could if you practiced. That's what my teacher says. Anyone can do anything if they practice enough." Lucas thought about that. Could he? Could anyone? Or were some things too broken to fix, some paths too far gone to walk back? Later, after the kids were in bed, Lucas sat on the back porch with David and Sarah. The night was cool and clear, stars visible in a way they never were in Chicago. "So," David said, "you want to talk about what's going on?" Lucas sipped the beer Sarah had handed him. "Not really, but I probably should." "You walked away from a major deal," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. "David told you." "I tell Sarah everything. She's smarter than both of us combined," Sarah smiled. "I don't know about that, but I do know what it looks like when someone's life stops working for them. I see it with my students all the time." "You're a teacher too?" Lucas asked. "High school English. And let me tell you, teenagers are very good at spotting when adults are pretending everything's fine. They don't buy the performance." "I'm not performing." Sarah gave him a look. "Lucas, you just walked away from your entire career trajectory because you met a stranger in an airport. That's not nothing." "I didn't walk away from my career. I walked away from one deal." "Did you, though?" David leaned forward. "Or did you walk away from the idea that you have to keep doing something just because you've always done it?" Lucas didn't answer. He looked up at the stars instead, thinking about Emma's note. "You gave me more than a car. You gave me a reason to believe I'm still worth trusting." "I spent 14 years building a life I thought I wanted," Lucas said finally. "And then a woman I'd never met asked me to trust her. And I did. And it made me realize I don't trust anyone, including myself." "Ooh, that's heavy," Sarah said gently. "Yeah. But it's also honest, and that's a start." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere down the street. "What's she like?" Sarah asked. "This woman. Emma? She's..." Lucas tried to find the words. "She's rebuilding her life from nothing, fighting to get her daughter back, working a minimum wage job and living in a halfway house and doing everything the hard way because it's the only way she has left. And she's doing it without certainty or safety nets or any guarantee it's going to work. And that matters to you," David said. "It does. Because I've never done anything like that. I've only ever taken calculated risks. Only ever bet on things I was pretty sure would work out." "And how's that been going?" Sarah asked. Lucas almost laughed. "Not great, apparently. So maybe it's time to try something different." "Like what?" "Like trusting yourself enough to not know what comes next." Sarah stood up. "I'm heading to bed. You two don't stay up too late. Tomorrow Katie wants to take you to the zoo, and she wakes up at 6:30 on weekends." After she left, David and Lucas sat in the dark for a long time without talking. Finally, David said, "You know what the best part of my life is?" "What?" "Not knowing what's going to happen. Every day is different. Every day Katie and Ben do something that surprises me or scares me or makes me laugh. I have no control over any of it, and it's terrifying and exhausting and the best thing I've ever done." "You're saying I should have kids?" "I'm saying you should stop trying to control everything. Stop trying to make your life make sense. Just live it and see what happens." Lucas looked at his brother. "When did you get so wise?" "When I gave up trying to be you." The words hit harder than Lucas expected. You were trying to be me. In college, yeah. You were the older brother who had everything figured out. Perfect grades, perfect plans, perfect execution. I wanted that. Spent 2 years trying to copy you. I had no idea. I know, because you were too busy being perfect to notice. David smiled. But then I met Sarah and she told me I was an idiot and I should just be myself. Best advice I ever got. She's good for you. She's everything for me. And those kids in there? They saved my life in ways I didn't even know it needed saving. David stood up. I'm not saying your life has to look like mine, but I am saying maybe stop building the life you think you're supposed to have and start living the one you actually want. What if I don't know what I want? Then figure it out. You've got time. After David went inside, Lucas stayed on the porch for another hour, thinking about everything and nothing. His phone buzzed once. Emma, sending a photo of her daughter from an old visit. A little girl with dark curls and a gap-toothed smile. This is what I'm fighting for, the text said. Lucas looked at the photo for a long time. Then he typed, She's beautiful. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to get another chance. We all need second chances. What's yours? Lucas thought about the question. What was his second chance? Not a deal or a business opportunity. Not a strategic pivot or market expansion. Something simpler and more terrifying than that. He typed, the chance to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to prove anything. Emma's response came quickly. That's the hardest work there is, but it's worth it. I promise. Lucas pocketed his phone and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in the vastness above him, there were answers to questions he was only now learning to ask. And for the first time in 14 years, Lucas Bennett was okay with not knowing what they were. Katie woke Lucas at 6:45 by jumping on his bed and announcing that the zoo opened at 9 and they needed to leave by 8:30 to get good parking. Lucas, who hadn't been woken up by a child in possibly his entire adult life, found himself laughing despite the ungodly hour. Does she do this every weekend? Lucas asked David over coffee 20 minutes later. Every single one. Welcome to parenthood, where sleep is a myth and children are tiny dictators. Sarah emerged from the kitchen with a travel mug and her keys. I'm heading to the farmer's market. You boys have fun with the animals. Try to keep Ben from lecturing the zookeepers about proper habitat design. He did that last time? Lucas asked. He did that every time, David said. The kid reads too much. The zoo was exactly what Lucas expected. Crowded, loud, full of families and strollers and children sticky with cotton candy before 10 in the morning. Katie dragged Lucas from exhibit to exhibit, providing detailed commentary on each animal that was approximately 60% accurate and 100% enthusiastic. Ben walked beside Lucas, hands in his pockets, affecting the world-weary attitude of a 9-year-old who'd seen it all. The lions look bored, Ben observed. They probably are, Lucas said. Hard to be excited about anything when you're in a cage. Ben looked up at him sharply. Are you in a cage? What? Dad says you're trying to figure out if you're in a cage. A metaphorical one. Lucas glanced at David, who was pretending to be very interested in the giraffe enclosure. Your dad talks about me a lot, apparently. He worries about you. He says you work too much and don't have any friends and live in a really expensive box. He said that? The box part was Mom. But yeah. Lucas didn't know whether to laugh or feel insulted, probably both. What do you think? Ben considered this with the seriousness of someone twice his age. I think grown-ups make things too complicated. If you don't like something, you should just stop doing it. What if it's not that simple? Why not? Lucas opened his mouth to explain about responsibilities and mortgages and the fact that you couldn't just walk away from a life you'd spent 14 years building. But looking at Ben's serious face, he couldn't find the words that didn't sound like excuses. You're right, Lucas said finally. It should be that simple. So why isn't it? Because adults are scared of what happens if they stop doing what they're supposed to do. That's dumb. Yeah, it kind of is. They spent 4 hours at the zoo. Lucas took approximately 50 photos on his phone. Katie with the elephants, Ben explaining penguin biology to a bewildered volunteer, David making faces at the monkeys while the monkeys made faces back. Normal family moments that Lucas had somehow convinced himself he didn't need. His phone buzzed while they were eating lunch at a picnic table near the exit. Emma, how's the visit going? Lucas typed, good. Exhausting. Katie has more energy than should be physically possible. Kids are like that. I forget sometimes how much energy my daughter has. 2 hours a week isn't enough to remember properly. You'll get there. More time, I mean. I hope so. Some days I believe it. Other days I'm just terrified I'll mess it up again. Lucas looked up at Katie and Ben, currently arguing about whether penguins or polar bears were better suited to cold climates. He thought about all the ways he'd messed up his own life, all the choices that had led him to a sterile apartment and an empty calendar. He typed, "You won't mess it up. You're fighting too hard to let that happen. What if fighting isn't enough? Then you fight harder, and you ask for help when you need it, like you did at the airport." A long pause, then, "Thank you. I needed to hear that today. Any time." That evening, after another chaotic dinner and another piano performance, this time with fewer wrong notes, Lucas found himself on the back porch again with David. Sarah had taken the kids to their rooms to read, and the house had settled into a comfortable quiet. "You're different with them than I expected," David said. "With who?" "Katie and Ben. I thought you'd be awkward, uncomfortable. But you're actually good with kids." Lucas sipped his beer. "I'm not good with kids. I just talk to them like they're people." "That's what being good with kids is. Most adults forget that part." David stretched his legs out. "They like you, by the way. Katie asked if you could come back for her birthday in July." "That's 4 months away." "I'm aware. But she's already planning it. You made an impression." Lucas thought about the past 2 days, about being woken up by a 7-year-old, about discussing the merits of various zoo animals with a 9-year-old philosopher, about sitting around a dinner table that was too small for the amount of chaos it contained. "I like them too," Lucas said quietly. "I didn't expect to, but I do." "Why didn't you expect to?" "Because I'm not built for this. For family, and chaos, and things I can't control." David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad used to say the same thing." Lucas turned to look at him. "What?" "After Mom died. He'd say he wasn't built for single parenthood, that he didn't know how to do it, but he did it anyway, showed up every day, even when he had no idea what he was doing. I remember him always knowing what he was doing. That's because you were 12, and everyone looks like they know what they're doing when you're 12. But I was 8, and I remember the nights he sat at the kitchen table trying to figure out how to braid hair for my school play, or the time he called Aunt Rachel at 2 in the morning because I had a fever and he panicked." Lucas had no memory of any of this. His memories of their father after their mother died were of someone solid and certain, someone who'd held everything together through sheer force of will. "He never told me any of that," Lucas said. "Because you were the older one. He needed you to believe he had it together. But he was terrified, Lucas, every single day. He just didn't let it stop him." Lucas felt something shift in his chest. All these years he'd been trying to live up to a version of his father that had never actually existed. Someone who had everything figured out, who never doubted, who controlled everything through careful planning. "I've been doing it wrong," Lucas said. "What?" "Everything. I've been trying to be someone who doesn't exist, trying to control things that can't be controlled, trying to build a life that looks successful instead of one that actually feels worth living." David didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was gentle. "So what are you going to do about it?" Lucas looked up at the stars again. Somewhere up there, Emma was putting in another shift at the restaurant, washing dishes and thinking about her daughter. Somewhere, Monica was probably still at the office, handling things Lucas used to think only he could handle. Somewhere, Richard Meridian was signing contracts with someone else and moving forward without him. And Lucas was sitting on a porch in Portland, drinking beer with his brother, finally asking the right questions. "I don't know yet," Lucas said, "but I think that's okay." Sunday morning arrived too quickly. Lucas's flight was at 3, which meant leaving the house by 1. Sarah made pancakes for breakfast while Katie and Ben argued about whether Uncle Lucas should live in Portland so he could visit more often. "I can't just move," Lucas said, though something about the idea didn't sound as impossible as it should have. "Why not?" Katie asked. "If you don't like where you live, you should live somewhere else. That's what Mom says." "Your mom is very wise." "I know. She tells us all the time." After breakfast, Lucas helped David clean up the kitchen while Sarah took the kids outside to play. "So," David said, scrubbing a pan, "what's the verdict? Are you going back to Chicago and pretending this weekend never happened, or are you actually going to do something with whatever you figured out?" "That's a very pointed question." "I'm a very pointed person." Lucas dried a plate and set it in the cabinet. "I think I'm going to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I don't know yet. Maybe restructure the company. Maybe step back from day-to-day operations. Maybe sell it entirely. I haven't decided." "Those are pretty different options." "I know, but they all involve the same thing, admitting that what I've been doing isn't working anymore." David turned off the water and looked at Lucas. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "I haven't actually done anything yet." "For admitting it. That's harder than most people think." They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. Then Lucas went upstairs to pack his bag. His phone buzzed while he was folding shirts. "Emma, first supervised visit is this morning. I'm sitting in the parking lot trying not to throw up from nerves." Lucas sat on the edge of the bed and typed, "You're going to be great. Just be yourself." That's all she needs. "What if myself isn't enough?" "It is. You drove 8 hours just to see her on her birthday. You're working a job that makes your hands raw. You're rebuilding your entire life for her. That's more than enough. What if she doesn't remember me?" Lucas thought about that, about how painful it would be to face your own child as essentially a stranger, about the courage it took to show up anyway. Then you remind her, gently, patiently. One visit at a time until she does. "You're good at this pep talk thing. I'm learning from the best." The drive to the airport was quieter than the drive from it had been. Katie was reading in the back seat. Ben was watching something on an iPad with headphones. David drove while Lucas sat in the passenger seat, watching Portland roll by. "Sarah wants you to come back for Thanksgiving," David said, "and Christmas, and honestly any other time you feel like showing up. Your family. You don't need an invitation." "I'll come back," Lucas said. And he meant it. At the airport, Katie and Ben both hugged him goodbye. Katie made him promise to practice piano, though he didn't have a piano. And Ben made him promise to read the book about dinosaurs he'd recommended. Sarah hugged him and whispered, "Don't be a stranger," in his ear. David walked Lucas to security. "This was good," David said. "Having you here, feeling like I have my brother back instead of just his business card." Lucas felt something tighten in his throat. "I'm sorry I disappeared." "You didn't disappear. You just got lost for a while, but you're finding your way back." They hugged, and Lucas made it through security before he had to deal with the fact that he was dangerously close to crying in an airport for the second time in 2 weeks. The flight back to Chicago was uneventful. Lucas used the time to think, to plan, to start sketching out what came next. Not detailed plans, he was done with those, just broad strokes, directions instead of destinations. By the time they landed, he had the beginning of an idea. Not a complete one, but enough to start with. He texted Monica from baggage claim. "Can you set up a meeting with the leadership team for tomorrow morning?" 9 a.m. Her response came quickly. "What's this about?" "Changes, good ones, I think." That's cryptic. "But okay, see you tomorrow." Lucas took a cab home. His apartment looked exactly the same as when he'd left it 3 days ago, but somehow it felt different, smaller, more like a temporary space than a home. He unpacked, made dinner, and sat on his couch with his laptop. Instead of opening email, he opened a blank document and started writing. Not a business plan, not a strategy memo, just thoughts about what he wanted his life to look like. What mattered? What didn't? An hour later, he had 3 pages of stream of consciousness rambling that wouldn't make sense to anyone but him. It was messy and uncertain and full of questions without answers. It was also the most honest thing Lucas had written in years. His phone buzzed. Emma. The visit was perfect. She remembered me. We read books and colored, and she told me about her foster family's dog. 2 hours went by in what felt like 10 minutes. But I get to do it again next week, and the week after that. I'm getting my daughter back, Lucas, slowly. But it's happening. Lucas read the message 3 times, feeling something warm and bright bloom in his chest. He typed, "That's incredible. I'm so happy for you. Thank you. For everything. For trusting me that day. For being someone I could text when things got hard. for reminding me I'm worth fighting for. You are. And so is she. So are you. Whatever you're figuring out, you're worth it too. Lucas looked at the message for a long time, then he typed, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." They texted for another few minutes before Emma had to go. Another shift starting, another day of building her new life 1 hour at a time. After she signed off, Lucas sat in the quiet of his apartment and thought about courage, about what it meant to start over, about the difference between building a life that looked successful and building one that actually felt worth living. Monday morning came too early. Lucas arrived at the office at 8, gave himself an hour to review financials and projections, then headed to the conference room at 9. Monica was already there, along with the 3 senior managers who kept Bennett Logistics running: Tom from operations, Jennifer from sales, and Marcus from finance. "This feels ominous," Tom said as Lucas sat down. "It's not ominous. It's just different." Monica raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Lucas took a breath. "I'm stepping back." Silence around the table. Then Jennifer said, "Stepping back from what?" "From everything. From day-to-day management. From being the person who makes every decision. From treating this company like it can't function without me." "Can it?" Marcus asked quietly. "That's what we're going to find out." Lucas pulled out the notes he'd made last night. "Here's what I'm proposing. We promote Monica to COO with full operational authority. Tom, Jennifer, Marcus, you 3 become the executive team that handles strategy and major decisions. I stay on as CEO in title only, come to quarterly board meetings, provide input when asked. But otherwise, I'm out." "You're quitting," Tom said. "I'm delegating. There's a difference." "Lucas," Monica's voice was careful, "we appreciate your confidence in us. But this is your company. You built it. You can't just walk away." "I'm not walking away. I'm letting go. Which is something I should have done years ago." "Why now?" Jennifer asked. Lucas thought about how to answer, about Emma's note and David's porch and Katie's piano and all the small moments that had added up to this one large realization. "Because I built this company to prove something," he said finally. "To prove I could control things. To prove I was successful. To prove I had my life together. And I did all of that. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to ask whether any of it was making me happy. Whether it was the life I actually wanted, or just the life I thought I was supposed to have." "And?" Monica asked. "And it isn't. I've been running on autopilot for so long that I forgot there were other ways to live." "So what are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I don't know yet. That's the point. I'm giving myself permission to not know, to figure it out as I go, to make mistakes and change my mind and try things that might not work." The room was quiet. Then Tom said, "That's the scariest thing I've ever heard a CEO say." "Probably, but it's honest." Monica leaned back in her chair. "You're really doing this." "I am, if you'll take it on." "Of course I'll take it on. I've been running this place behind the scenes for years anyway." She smiled. "But Lucas, are you sure? This is a big decision." "I'm sure. For the first time in a long time, I'm absolutely sure." The meeting lasted another hour. They hammered out details: transition timeline, communication strategy, how to handle clients and staff. By the end, they had a rough plan that would take Lucas from hands-on CEO to advisory figurehead over the next 6 months. It should have felt like losing something. Instead, it felt like winning. After everyone left, Monica lingered. "So what's next? After you're not running Bennett Logistics anymore?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Monica studied him. "You're different. Since the airport thing. Since Emma. Whatever happened, it changed you." "Yeah, it did." "Is that good or bad?" Lucas thought about the question. "It's honest. Which I think is better than good or bad." "Fair enough." Monica headed for the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. You've been wound too tight for too long. Maybe it's time to see what happens when you let yourself breathe." After she left, Lucas sat alone in the conference room for a long time. His phone buzzed. "Emma, how did the meeting go?" "Good. Scary. I'm stepping back from the company." "Wow, that's huge. How do you feel?" "Terrified. Free. Both at the same time." That sounds about right. Welcome to starting over. Is it always this hard? Always. But it gets easier. Or maybe you just get stronger. Hard to tell the difference. Lucas smiled. Any advice? Yeah. Don't do it alone. Find people who will remind you why you're doing this when it gets hard. People who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. Like you? If you want. I'm pretty good at pep talks now. Deal. The next 6 months passed in a strange blur of change and uncertainty. Lucas transitioned out of his daily role at Bennett Logistics gradually, watching Monica step into the position with a confidence that made him realize how much he'd been holding her back. The company didn't collapse. If anything, it ran smoother without him micromanaging every decision. He sold his apartment in May and moved into a smaller place in a different neighborhood, one with trees and coffee shops and people who walk dogs instead of just rushing past each other. He started volunteering at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people find housing and employment. He visited Portland twice more, spending long weekends with David's family and learning how to be an uncle who actually showed up. And he kept texting Emma. Their messages became a daily ritual, checking in, sharing wins and losses, providing encouragement when things got hard. Emma's supervised visits turned into unsupervised ones. 2 hours became 4, then full days. Her daughter's foster family started including Emma in school events and birthday parties. By August, they were discussing the possibility of Emma regaining custody. Lucas watched her rebuild her life with the determination that made his own changes feel small by comparison. Every time he doubted himself, every time he wondered if he'd made a massive mistake, he thought about Emma driving 8 hours to see her daughter, about the courage it took to ask for help, about the faith required to believe things could get better. In September, Emma texted him. Big news. The court approved my petition. I get full custody back next month. Lucas called her immediately. It was the first time they'd actually spoken on the phone since the airport. You did it, he said when she answered. I did it. Her voice was thick with emotion. I actually did it. She's coming home, Lucas. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, without that day at the airport, without you believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You did the work, all of it. I just loaned you a car. Emma laughed through what sounded like tears. You loaned me more than a car. You know that, right? Lucas did know. He'd been thinking about it for months, about how that single decision in a crowded airport had changed both their lives. How trust, offered without guarantee of return, had created something neither of them could have predicted. We should meet, Lucas said. Actually meet, not just text. I'd like that. Where are you these days? Chicago still, but I'm thinking about moving. Haven't decided where yet. You should come here, to Iowa, meet my daughter, see what your crazy decision made possible. I'd love that. They made plans for October. Lucas would drive out, he'd kept the Audi, though he rarely drove it, and spend a weekend meeting the daughter Emma had fought so hard to reclaim. It felt right somehow, full circle. The week before his trip, Lucas had dinner with Monica. They met at a small restaurant near his new apartment, and she immediately commented on how different he looked. You're not wearing a suit, she said. I didn't know you owned other clothes. I'm full of surprises. Apparently, Monica ordered wine, then turned her attention fully on Lucas. So, 6 months out. How are you feeling? Good. Better than I expected. Any regrets about walking away from Meridian? Lucas thought about it. No. Turns out walking away from the wrong thing is one of the best decisions I ever made. And the company? Any regrets about stepping back? Also no. You're doing great. Better than I did, honestly. That's not true. It is. You care about the people. I cared about the metrics. There's a difference. Monica sipped her wine. You know what's funny? I was so worried about you. Thought you were having a breakdown. Turns out you were just having a breakthrough. David said the same thing. He's smart. So is this Emma person you're going to visit? How do you know about that? Because you've been texting her constantly for 6 months, and you smile every time your phone buzzes. It's not exactly subtle. Lucas felt his face warm. It's not like that. Sure it's not. Monica smiled. Look, I don't know what it is, but whatever you two have, it's good for you. You're happier than I've ever seen you, more human. I was human before. Were you? Because I'm not sure. You were more like a very efficient robot who occasionally made small talk. That's harsh, but accurate. Lucas couldn't really argue. 6 months ago, he would have been offended. Now, he just laughed. Fair enough. They talked through dinner about the company, about Lucas's volunteer work, about Monica's kids and their various dramas. It was comfortable and easy in a way that work conversations had never been. When they parted ways, Monica hugged him. I'm proud of you, she said, for doing the hard thing, for choosing to be happy instead of successful. Who says I'm not both? You are now, but you weren't. That's the point. The drive to Iowa took longer than Lucas expected. Traffic was light, but he drove slowly, taking back roads instead of highways, stopping when something looked interesting instead of pushing through to make time. The landscape shifted gradually from urban to suburban to rural, and Lucas found himself relaxing in a way he never did on business trips. He arrived in Riverside just before dinner on Friday evening. Emma had given him the address of her apartment, a small two-bedroom in a complex near the center of town. Lucas parked and texted her that he'd arrived. She came out a minute later, and Lucas's breath caught. It wasn't that she looked different, though she did, healthier and more settled than in the airport. It was the way she moved, confident, purposeful, like someone who'd found solid ground after months of treading water. You made it, she said, smiling. I did. They stood there for a moment, taking each other in. Then Emma laughed. This is weird, right? We've been texting for 6 months, but we don't actually know each other. Little bit weird, Lucas agreed. But good weird. Come on. Sophie's inside. She's nervous about meeting you. She knows about me? Of course. I told her you're the person who helped Mommy when things were hard. She's been asking questions all week. Lucas followed Emma upstairs to a second-floor apartment. It was small but clearly lived in, toys in a basket by the couch, drawings on the refrigerator, a child's jacket hung carefully by the door. This was what Emma had fought for. This was what his trust had helped make possible. Sophie was sitting on the couch, coloring intently. She looked up when they came in. Dark curls like in the photo Emma had sent, gap-toothed smile, eyes that were wary but curious. Sophie, this is Mr. Lucas, Emma said gently. The friend Mommy told you about. Just Lucas is fine, Lucas said, crouching down to Sophie's level. What are you drawing? Sophie held up the paper. It's our apartment, see? That's my room, and that's Mommy's room, and that's the kitchen where we make pancakes. That's beautiful. You're very talented. Sophie considered this seriously. Mommy says you let her borrow your car. I did. That was nice. Mommy says we should always help people when they need it. Your mommy's right. They spent the evening together, simple and ordinary. They ordered pizza. Sophie showed Lucas her room and her collection of stuffed animals. Emma told stories about Sophie's first week back home, the good parts and the hard parts and everything in between. Lucas watched them together and felt something settle in his chest. This was why he'd said yes in the airport. Not because he'd known it would lead here, but because this was what trust looked like when you let it grow. After Sophie went to bed, Lucas and Emma sat on the small balcony overlooking the parking lot. Thank you for coming, Emma said. It means a lot. To both of us. Thank you for inviting me. For letting me be part of this. You are part of this. You made it possible. Lucas shook his head. I loaned you a car. You did everything else. You gave me hope. That's bigger than a car. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Emma said, So what's next for you, now that you're not running a company anymore? I don't know. That's still the scariest and best part. I'm thinking about moving. Maybe Portland, maybe somewhere else. I'm thinking about doing more volunteer work. Maybe going back to school for something completely different. The options are kind of overwhelming. That's a good problem to have. Is it? Better than having no options at all. Trust me on that one. Lucas thought about the past 6 months, about all the ways his life had changed since that day at O'Hare, about how scary it had been to let go of control, and how freeing it had been once he actually did it. Can I ask you something? Lucas said. Anything. How did you know that I was the right person to ask? That I'd say yes? Emma smiled. I didn't, but you looked like someone who was ready for something to change, like you were waiting for permission to do something different. So I gave you a reason, by asking for my car. By asking you to trust me. That's what you really gave me that day. Not transportation, trust. Lucas felt something warm spread through his chest. I'm glad I said yes. Me too. They talked until late, sharing stories about the past 6 months, about the changes they'd made and the fears they still carried. Emma told him about the court hearings and the supervised visits, and the moment the judge said Sophie could come home. Lucas told her about stepping back from Bennett Logistics and selling his apartment and learning how to be Uncle Lucas instead of just Lucas Bennett, CEO. You're building a new life, Emma said. Just like me. Slower than you, less dramatic. Different doesn't mean less. You're doing the work. That's what matters. Lucas stayed through Sunday. They went to the park where Emma and Sophie played on the swings. They had lunch at a diner where everyone seemed to know Emma and welcomed her back like she'd always belonged. They spent Sunday afternoon coloring while Sophie narrated elaborate stories about the pictures they were creating. When it was time to leave, Sophie hugged Lucas goodbye. Will you come back? She asked. If your mom invites me. She will. She likes you. She smiles different when she talks about you. Emma's face flushed. Sophie, what? You do. Lucas looked at Emma, saw something in her expression that matched what he'd been feeling all weekend. This wasn't just gratitude or friendship. It was something deeper, something neither of them had been looking for but had found anyway. I'll come back, Lucas said. Promise. The drive home felt different than the drive there. Lucas had time to think, to process, to understand what had happened over the past 6 months. He'd walked away from everything that defined him, had let go of control and certainty and careful planning, had trusted a stranger in an airport, and somehow, impossibly, it had led him here to a new life that felt more real than anything he'd built before. His phone rang an hour outside Chicago. David. Hey, stranger, his brother said. How was Iowa? Good. Really good. And Emma? Also good. She's incredible, David. What she's done. How hard she fought. You like her? Yeah, I do. As in like. Lucas laughed. Are we 12? I'm just asking, because Sarah's been speculating for months and she'll want details. Tell Sarah she's probably right, but it's new and complicated and we're taking it slow. That's very mature of you. I'm trying something different, being patient instead of controlling everything. Look at you, growing as a person. They talked for a few more minutes before David had to go deal with some crisis involving Ben and a science experiment gone wrong. After they hung up, Lucas drove in silence, watching the sun set over fields that would soon give way to suburbs and then city. By the time he pulled into his parking garage, it was after 8. Lucas sat in the car for a moment before getting out, thinking about the journey that had started in this exact spot 6 months ago. When he'd handed his keys to a stranger and made a decision that violated every principle he'd built his life on, he pulled out his phone and texted Emma. Made it home. Thank you for this weekend. For everything. Her response came quickly. Thank you for coming, for being someone we can count on. Sophie already asked when you're coming back. What did you tell her? That I'd have to ask you. Ask me. Will you come back? Lucas looked at his phone, at the question that meant so much more than just another visit. He thought about Sophie's drawings and Emma's smile and the way it felt to be part of something that mattered more than spreadsheets and profit margins. He typed, yes, as often as you'll have me. That might be a lot. I'm counting on it. Lucas went upstairs to his apartment. It was small and still mostly empty. He hadn't accumulated much in the 6 months since moving, but it felt like home in a way his old place never had. He made dinner, unpacked his bag, and sat by the window looking out at his neighborhood. His phone buzzed one more time. Emma, I'm glad you were at that airport. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad you said yes. Me too, to all of it. Get some rest. Talk tomorrow? Always. Lucas set his phone down and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Monica was probably working late even though she didn't have to. David was tucking his kids into bed. Emma was reading Sophie a bedtime story in their small apartment in Iowa. And Lucas was here, in his quiet apartment, finally at peace with not knowing what came next. He thought about Emma's note from 6 months ago. You gave me a reason to believe I'm still worth trusting. She'd given him something too, proof that taking risks on people, that choosing trust over control, that letting go of certainty could lead somewhere better than any plan he could have designed. Lucas Bennett had spent 14 years building a life that looked successful on paper, but felt empty in practice. And then he'd met a stranger in an airport and handed her his car keys, and everything had changed. Not because the stranger had changed him, but because she'd reminded him that he could change himself, that it was never too late to start over, that courage wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being brave enough to ask the questions. Lucas pulled out his laptop and opened a new document. Not a business plan this time, just thoughts about what he wanted the next chapter to look like. Maybe Portland, maybe Iowa, maybe somewhere completely different, maybe a new career helping people the way he'd helped Emma, maybe a relationship with someone who understood what it meant to rebuild from scratch. Maybe all of it, maybe none of it, maybe something he hadn't even considered yet. The cursor blinked on the empty page, waiting. Lucas smiled and started typing. For the first time in years, the blank page didn't feel terrifying. It felt like possibility.